tech for us, Matthew.
Great. I'm going to do one thing, but I'll be right there.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ty Adams. Welcome to TRA Marketplace 2020. Thank you for joining us today, for everything has changed with these people. Please feel free to ask questions using our Q&A window below. Without further delay, I am excited to introduce our Big Ben stage sponsor, Texas Mutual.
In response to the pandemic, Texas Mutual will distribute $330 million in dividends to eligible policyholders 2 months ahead of schedule. We're also sending $2 million to nonprofits on the front lines of the COVID-19 effort. Better days are coming, but in the meantime, we'll be on the job helping Texas businesses. To learn how dividends are supporting employers in this time of need, go to texasmutual.com/dividends.
Awesome. Super huge thank you to Texas Mutual. Awesome. Without further delay, I also want to go on and get the session kicked off. Everyone, I'd like to introduce this session's panelist speaker, none other than Mr. Matthew Mabel. Matthew.
Hey, Ty. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Endless Summer. I see a lot of people I'm used to seeing on the show floor. So welcome to participants. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Matthew Mabel. My company is Surrender. My life's work is helping successful restaurateurs grow their businesses, increase their revenue, their profits, their units, have a more harmonious experience at work, and a flexible life out of work. So let's see who's here. I see a lot of familiar names. I wish I could see your faces. Aaron, Adam, Bill, Ed, Jim, Jessica, Kendra, Melissa. I could keep on going. So a lot of people that I'm used to seeing when we're all together at the floor at Marketplace, and I'll be hopefully seeing soon. And hopefully we'll also all be together next year at Marketplace. What we're going to do today is talk about people and the fact that all the people you deal with in your business have changed considerably since the beginning of March, just like you have. And along the way, I'm going to give you a chance to make comments, ask questions, just jump in. You've got a Q&A box, you've got a chat box. I will stop at times, but don't wait for me to stop. Just chime in there. We're here in this virtual conference format, and that's emblematic of our new world, that everything has changed. Everything's changed at Marketplace, and certainly the talk that I planned in February for this summer, I threw out and decided instead to bring you some of the technique that my clients and I are using to make sure that they have all the information and relationships they need to survive, to stabilize, and to dominate their segment once this is all over. So just like you have totally had to retool your business and learn about PPP and go into the to-go business, even if you weren't in the to-go business, and renegotiate your rents with your landlords, we've had to retool everything at this conference. And what I'm suggesting is, if you haven't stopped to think about retooling the way that you talk to people in your business, now's the time, because everything has changed with these people. So the need for new technique in your restaurants and your financing and the way you work is just as great as the need to deal with people differently. You know, most of the people that I see out there on this Zoom have had an incredibly frightening experience in the last 6 months, and they've pulled back from that. And figured out how to move forward. That was a tough one. Everybody saw a version of business death at the beginning when we were coming into work and finding out we were being closed down. And we had to process that, and then we had to pick ourselves up off the floor and get to work. And that's why I want to really talk to you today about dealing with people, because your managers, your employees, your guests have had the same experience. And while we're reinventing our business model as restaurants, we have to reinvent the way that we talk to people. And you have a choice. You're either going to bond with these people, with your managers, your leaders, your employees, and your guests, or if you fail to rise to the occasion in this opportunity, you're going to alienate them. And that is going to dictate the future, working or not working, for your company when this is over. What do owners and leaders of restaurants do all day? We talk. And the words that come out of our mouths and the things that we're interested in indicate to the people around us what we care about, what's important, and who we are as people. And we have a hugely high calling to get through this crisis, to be the best people we can be, while at the same time, we're dealing with these crazy new things in our business that we never had to think about before. It's not easy, but the path is clear, and we're going to talk about the path today. So you've changed your restaurants. I hope you've changed your talk. Certainly your audience has changed. And they need to hear different things. So we're going to talk about all your different audiences, yourself, your managers, your leaders, your employees, and your guests in this 1 hour together. I'm going to give you some specific ideas of things you ought to be doing with each of those groups. I know a lot of you are note takers. I know TRA will post this on YouTube when it's all over. But if you like, at the end of the workshop, we're going to put my email address up if you don't already have it. And feel free to email me, and we will send you some of these lists that you'll be seeing so you don't have to take notes. So, everybody ready? Here we go. Here's what happened this year. Sometime in the middle of March, you went to sleep on a beautiful summer night. The idea of a beautiful summer night comes up because we were just rolling along. Our businesses were great. Sure, we had our challenges. Our businesses were great. We were happy. We knew what was in front of us. And we were pretty level-headed. We were pretty even keel. We were pretty steady. But when we woke up, and we woke up around March 13th or 14th, we looked out the window and it was the middle of winter. There was ice on the ground. The cars weren't starting. We needed help. We didn't even know what kind of help. We didn't even know we could get to work. And that mindset, from the bucolic summer feeling to the bleak winter feeling, is what came over us as we experienced the news leading to the first shutdown. And that was an extremely impactful experience for all of us. Not all of us have gotten over it. We've learned to deal with it, but not all of us have gotten over it. And that's the same for your managers, your leaders, your employees, and your guests. You know, we were enjoying the summertime, and now it's been pretty frosty out there for 6 months. The people that learn how to talk to these changed people are the people that are going to win. So I'm going to help you adjust, and it's going to be one of the factors to your success. And we're going to come back here in person one day and go, remember how we got through the pandemic. The first person you talk to is probably not who you're thinking of. The first person you talk to is yourself, if you're a restaurant owner. We talk to ourselves all the time. Our whole life is self-talk. It gets us out the door in the morning. It evaluates our days. It helps us decide what we should be doing. So here's 3 insights about restaurant owners and how things have changed. We're dealing with situations we never imagined before. People that have been in the business for 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years pretty much knew what they were doing, and they were continuing to learn new things that came out in the industry. But all of a sudden, we had to deal with all these new things that we had never, ever imagined before. Number 2, and we've accepted that we might lose everything. I have had so many conversations with people. I called one of my clients right as the first day of the shutdown, and they said to me, I can't believe that everything I've worked 17 years for could go away in a week. That was the conversation so many people had. We might lose everything. And I keep hearing stories about that from all the people that I work with. And part of that conversation was frightening, but part of it was freeing, because once you accept that you could have lost everything, then at some point you pick yourself up off the floor and you get to work, so that you make sure you have the best chance of that not happening. And number three, totally contrasting those feelings that we might lose everything. Number three is restaurateurs are by nature optimistic and determined. I've never met a restaurateur that came to me and said, hey, I'm opening a restaurant, it's probably not going to work, or it might be average. Everybody I know is passionate and excited about their concepts and their people and what they can do. So you have a contrast between facing possible business death and being a naturally determined and optimistic person. And I see that with all the owners that I continue to work with on a daily basis. So, what to do in talking to yourself? Don't be afraid of talking to yourself. Talk to yourself and realize that you must support your mental and emotional health. If you bypass this step and just keep doing, there's going to be a point of diminishing returns. And 6 months in to the crisis, you probably already crossed that line. So it's very important, number one, to be conscious of your mental and emotional health. Rejuvenate. Find an avenue to rejuvenate. Everybody's different. When I talk to restaurateurs, I hear so many different stories about how they rejuvenate. One might go on a bike ride in the middle of the day every day for 25 miles. One might start their day meditating in the morning. One may make sure they have time at the end of the day to go back in their backyard and sit under a big tree. So many different stories that I've heard about self-care and how to take care of yourself. So it's very important that you find an avenue to rejuvenate. Extremely important. Don't push yourself like a superhero. You're not a superhero. You're a restaurateur. And one of the nice things that I've experienced is I have met almost no restaurateurs in the last 6 months in helping all these companies survive who said to me, Matthew, this is horrible. I'm working 14 hours a day, 7 days a week to keep my business alive. Where I think maybe 15, 20 years ago, if we had had such a horrible thing happen, you would think about that. But today, I think people are really, really conscious of the need for self-care and the things that they can do. So most of the restaurateurs I know have found that outlet. So my invitation to you, once you've found it, is make sure that you continue to use it and find out how that works for you. So I want to take a second here and check and see I got a question. Has anybody got a story? I talk about, meditation, exercise, sitting in the backyard at the end of the day. If anybody's got another story that they use, an example they want to share with us, I'd love for you to put it in the chat box for all of us, because we're all trying to learn different ways we can take care of ourselves to get through this. So that is the story of how to take care of yourself. Talk to yourself first. So the next group of constituents is your management and your leadership teams. Your management and your leadership teams, these are the people that are making your restaurants go every day. And as I work more and more with restaurant owners about making sure that we take care of ourselves. Here's one from Melissa. We as a company have done a walking challenge. It was great to do it as a team. We're also doing 20-minute meditations 3 times a day. That's a great, great contribution. Thanks, Melissa. As we worked more and more on this with ownership, all of a sudden, some owners started to say, and some of those owners are in this call with us right now, I'm doing this for myself, and I can take the morning off if I need to. I can just make myself very flexible and be able to do what I need to do for me. But what about my leaders and my managers? They have a schedule. They don't have the freedom to do the things that I do. And that really made us think. And it made us think about what we could do for our leaders and for our managers. And here are some insights about the leaders and the managers and what they've experienced in the last 6 months. Number one, they're as stressed as we are. We think about what we're dealing with, and we've got to be sympathetic and empathetic to the stress that they're dealing with. Number two, they see numbers every day that are unsustainable. We have taught our leaders and our managers to manage to a budget. They know where we make money. They know where they get bonused. They know what the comps are from last year. And they're looking at these numbers day in and day out, realizing in most cases, but not all, in most cases, those numbers are unsustainable. That is extremely stressful for them because they don't understand the financing aspects and the landlord negotiations and the government money the way that we all do. So that's a real big aspect of stress in their lives. Number three, they've got families. They've got kids, relatives, neighbors, and friends that they're thinking about all the time, just like we are. They're preoccupied with how people are doing in their lives because everybody's affected by this crisis. And to a certain extent, they always had that in the back of their mind when they were at work, but now it's in the front of their mind. Number four, they're doing something that's very hard to do. They're providing hospitality in a stressful environment, which is basically a conflicting thing if you think about it. And they know that they're essential workers, they're working with other essential workers, and they have a higher COVID risk than most people. Wow, as if their jobs weren't hard enough before the pandemic. So they're having to be hospitable and upbeat and happy and encouraging and caring and service-oriented while they know what's going out in the world and that they are now deemed essential workers who have a higher risk level than non-essential workers. So these people really need our help and really need to look in. So what do we do with them? What do we say to them? The first thing we say to them is so simple, so simple. How is everything at home? How is everything at home? That's just a lead in to a conversation to let them vent, to let them know how much we care, and to understand them better in a way that they need to be understood right now. Number two, here's a really revealing question to ask your leaders and your managers. How do you feel when you come to work every day, and how do you feel when you go home? It used to be, way back, 6 months ago, where there's a good chance they were pretty pumped up to run a great shift on the way to work. If they were leaders, they were pretty pumped up to achieve things in your corporate office or in your system. And now they may be a little nervous on the way to work. Their head may be back at home because they just left their spouse and their kids in homeschooling. They could be worried about a parent that's a high risk. And then how do they feel on their way home? It used to be they felt like, hey, we nailed it today. We made a lot of people happy. And now on the way home, they may be feeling, whew, we got through another day safely. And now I got to go home to my family and take care of that whole situation. So that's a really good question to ask. How do you feel on the way to work? And how do you feel on the way home? Another good question is a parallel of what I just talked about for ownership. What do you do to relieve stress and stay strong and optimistic? They don't have the latitude we have in our schedule, but they need stress relief as much as anybody does. So a question for them is, what do you do to relieve stress? And the follow-up question, once you find out how they relieve stress, is how can we help you do that? So carve out, it's a time to be extremely flexible with these people and carve out a way of giving them stress relief because they need it. Number 5, do you know how much we appreciate you? The answer is probably they don't, or they assume it, because we might not be able to stop right now in the middle of this battle for our business lives to remind them how much we appreciate them. While at the same time, when I talk to restaurant owners, what I find is they appreciate their people more than ever, because look at what they're doing now. Essential workers on the front lines in a pandemic. So take the time to remind them how much you appreciate them. Super important. And finally, future pace them. It's hard. It's tough coming in every day, dealing with hand sanitizers and 6-foot distances and partitions and guests that are confused or scared. This is hard. And it's important to remind them that it won't always be like that. So we future pace them and we ask them, hey, can you see a future when we're back on top? So that they realize that this is not a permanent condition and that there's going to be a better result in the future. It's very important that you future pace them into a time when things are back and you're back on top. And these are things that I'm finding are great things to say to your leaders and your managers. Has anybody got another example about what they're doing with leaders and managers that they're thinking is really impactful they'd like to share? Please type it into the chat box or the Q&A. I will tell you a story about somebody who I know who sat down one day in his restaurant company, which is fairly significant size restaurant company, and decided to write a personal note to every manager in the company, everyone. Well, he didn't have a lot to do anyway. He was home. He couldn't go out. There was no place to go. But he took the time to write a personal letter to every manager appreciating how they had helped the company get through this, and nice touch, enclosed a modest check. That's a great example of going and really stopping and appreciating your leaders and your managers. So I recommend you find a way to express it in your own personal way just as soon as you can. So what's the next logical step from the leaders and the managers? Of course, it's our staff, our employees. They have different needs. They've been on a roller coaster. They have friends that are working, friends that are not working, friends that got sick, just, family members that are high risk, and they're coming to work every day. And here's the thing about them. It's also a great time to dig deeper into their lives because this is no longer business as usual. So here are some of my insights about your staff. Number one, they're more focused on what they take home than what you take home. So you're in the middle of this battle to save your company, and they're focused on how are my tips today, which, by the way, their tips were great because tipping is at an all-time high and is staying that way. What does my paycheck look like? That's the kind of thing they're thinking about. And the fact that their paycheck is coming in and their tips are high is really helping them. So that's a real positive thing for them, especially if they're worried about losing their jobs. Number two, they live with an uncertain future, just like I was talking about earlier. They've concerned the jobs, families, kids, relatives, neighbors. They've got this whole other aspect of their life. They may be parents trying to figure out what to do with their kids when school starts or doesn't start. They may have a grandparents that they haven't been able to see for 6 months. All the things we're all dealing with on every block, on every city, in every state all over this country. So we have to understand that that's a fact for them. And because of that, because they're dealing with all these new things in the world and the danger of being an essential worker, they have a new conversation in their head. Number three, am I working in the right industry? Is the restaurant thing, is that really my thing? That's a really big question that I think a lot of restaurant workers are questioning now. And a whole other conversation for us to have is, where are we going to get our workforce from? Because we all know what the statistics on that look like. While a lot of our workers are starting to question their decision to be with us just because of the unique situation our industry is in during the pandemic. So just like I have questions for yourself and questions for your managers, I have questions for things to ask for your staff. And these are questions you may ask if you're an owner or a manager. If you're an owner, of course, you can't talk to all your employees, but you can have a system in your company where your managers are asked to have these conversations with the people they work with, and they can bring them back to weekly operations meeting. That can roll up to a corporate huddle so that you're getting this information. You must have this information about your leaders, your managers, and your staff. And soon we'll talk about guests in order to run a great restaurant company during a pandemic. So same questions you asked your manager. How is everyone at home? How's it going? Simple question, opens up a dialogue, allows them to vent, allows them to see that you care. Number two, has this crisis changed your thoughts about the restaurant industry for better or for worse? There's a whole group of employees that they've never seen themselves as essential workers. They never imagined, we used to say, come to our restaurant, it'll be a 90-minute vacation or a 60-minute vacation. Now, the restaurant meal some of our guests have is the best thing that happened to them all week. So some of our employees are really conscious of the value and the specialness that we bring, and that's really motivating. And other employees we have are sick and tired of individual ketchup packets and hand sanitizer, and they're wondering if there might be a better alternative. So it's the elephant in the room. And those of you people that know me know my saying is, when in doubt, tell the truth. We can't hide this. We need to get that out in the open. How are they feeling about the restaurant industry? Number three, do they feel safe at work? And how can we help you feel safer? Super important conversation to have. We know that all the data we're seeing now says safety is the #1 issue for our guests, but it's also a big issue for our employees. So we want to know that they feel safe, that we're not putting them in a position that they feel unsafe, and what they would like us to do to make them feel safer, to put them at ease. Number four, just kind of what I said earlier, if they don't immediately articulate the satisfaction of catering to our guests during a very difficult time, we want to open up that possibility for them. Do you get that what we're doing for people is fantastic right now? That they really need us? And finally, number five, once again, appreciation. Do you know how much we appreciate you and the way we represent our brand? We probably haven't stopped to say that enough. You can never say that enough. And they need to hear that right now, because they have other choices other than getting up every morning and coming to work in our restaurants. So these are great questions to ask your employees, and from the answers that you get or your managers bring back to weekly operations or roll up to a corporate huddle, will guide you on the things that you can do to retain, motivate, inspire, enroll, and inculcate great employees that you're going to need forever and ever. Amen. And if you don't do this the right way, and I talked earlier about you've got a choice between bonding and alienating, this is a great way to bond. And if you don't do it, you're going to wind up alienating some of your employees, and your choice of bonding or alienating is going to dictate your corporate culture for years on the other side of this. So this is really, really important stuff. So if anybody has something they're doing with their employees in this regard that they want to share, it'd be great for you to type that into the chat box or put it in the question box so that I can share it with other people. And while you're thinking about that, I want to share with you another story of another one of my clients. They hired a food truck. They're not in the food truck business. They didn't put their food in the food truck. They had no interest in being in the food truck business. They rented a food truck which drove to the parking lots around all of their individual locations. And that was staff meal that day, after lunch, before dinner. And they made sure that that food truck hit every location for either a lunch shift or a dinner shift. Just a simple way of saying, we appreciate you. So find a way to appreciate your people. It's very important to communicate that to them right now as we get through this. So that's the way that I'm seeing yourself, your leaders, your managers, and your employees, and how they've changed and how you must change in the way that you talk to them so that you can survive, stabilize, dominate, and be one of the groups that's a year or two from now saying, hey, we made it and we're better than ever. Very important. And hang on, let me take a look at what people have typed in. So here is another story. 2 restaurants exchanged shift meals and treated the staff to a free meal. Usually they're competitors, but they came together to treat employees. That's great. You know how we used to trade gift cards for bonuses? It's a great example of that, and something that people are really going to remember. So there's I'm looking at some other things on the box here. There's great number of things that you can be doing, and hope this leads you to think about it, to bond with these employees that you're going to need forever and ever. So we've talked about yourself. We've talked about your leaders. We've talked about your managers. We've talked about your employees. Who are the other people that you talk to every day that are going to decide the future of your brand? It's the guest. The guest has changed so much. You can't even recognize them. What they want is nothing like what they used to want. Can you imagine? Nobody could have ever even predicted this. Nobody could understand this until it happened. So your guest also needs special and new care from you. And what I've noticed is it's best to think about this by segmenting the guest into 3 categories. You've got a dine-in guest, you've got a to-go delivery guest, and you've got the unready. And each of them have different needs. There are segments of those guests, and we're learning a lot about segmenting our to-go and delivery guests right now because to-go and delivery is so important. But really you have 3 guest types, and probably before you had 1. So you have to think even harder about this, even harder about how I'm going to get guest feedback, share it, put it into action, and make my restaurants better. And this is something you can do. This is something your managers can do, your staff can do, and roll that up through pre-shift, through weekly operations meeting, through corporate huddles. And if you don't have a really good idea of what your guest is thinking, then you're not going to make the right moves. So let's talk about these guests and what we know about their behavior in this new world. Dining room guest is back. They're happy to be back. They're easy to see. They're easy to talk to. The easiest to talk to, of course, because they're there. And the insights that I have about the dining room guest is that of most people, they are motivated by the idea of returning as closely as they can to regular life. They had the hardest time staying home and they had to stay home. And they are just thrilled to be in your restaurant. They love your restaurant like they never loved it before. So that's a really positive thing for us. Number 2, they yearn to be free. They just want to roam free. They just want to do what they've done their whole lives. They want to be out. They want to be with their friends and their family and enjoy their lives. Number 3, they understand their reward to risk tolerance. So, like a lot of parents, myself and my friends are talking about whether or not we're sending our kids back to school or whether we're keeping them home. And one of my daughter's friend's dad said, I'm sending my daughter to school. She has a higher risk of getting hit by a car than getting COVID-19, right? So he had already evaluated his own version of a reward to risk ratio for his daughter going into an elementary school with 1,000 other kids. And just like that, the guests in the dining room have evaluated their reward risk ratio, and they're here. They're back. We're happy to have them. So what are the things we want to talk to these people about so that we can do the most things, the best things for our restaurants? Number 1, do you expect that things are going to go back to feeling like they used to? We need to understand what the end game is here. Is this it? Is this what things are going to be like for years? Is anybody ever going to look at us the same way? Or is this how it's going to be, and is that okay with them? We must know that. Number 2, what do you experience as the best part of being with us in the dining room? Why is that an important question? We are in the marketing and the branding business, and we've got to know what they're buying now. We see all this data right now saying that guest safety is the #1 motivator, but we need to go deeper on that. We need to, as marketers, we need to sell them what they're buying. And all great advertising is based on market research. So you must be in a dialogue with your guest about what is motivating them most of all, so you can have more guests in the future. Number 3, are you comforted are by wearing of masks, social distancing, and sanitizing procedures. I have a client that when all this started, he told his staff, when you put the hand sanitizer on and when you rub your hands together, make sure you're doing it in the middle of the dining room so that the guests see it. Because he realized that we needed to be extremely, not just transparent, but demonstrative about what we're doing. And these people had no idea all the things we spent our whole careers doing in food safety to keep them safe. And the gravity with which we've treated that, they have had no idea about that. But now we want them to see what we're doing and we want to know if that comforts them. Because that's very important to the future of our business, comfort. Number 4, here's a really creative thing. You've got these people in the dining room. They can be brand evangelists for you. They can be ambassadors for their brand. There may be other things that they want or that their friends that are not coming out to the dining room want. So I want to say, hey, we're really glad you're in tonight. Do you know about our to-go program? Do you know about our family meals? Do you know about our meal kits, our freeze at home entrees, our party packs? If you want to come in an extra night this week, would you consider a great to-go experience? Or do you have friends that aren't coming to our restaurant yet? And would you help us by telling them they can have our great food and great drinks without leaving their home? Work with your existing guests to make them ambassadors of your brand. You do not have $1 to take for granted right now. Very, very important. And I really want to emphasize the always important reason to have a dialogue with your guests, never more important than now. So if somebody has a story of what they're doing with their guests, then by all means, put it in the chat box or the Q&A box. Thanks for some of the comments on the chat. I'll try and respond to all those later or in an email. And let's talk about the next piece of our guest. Our next piece of our guest is a guest that's new to a lot of us, or certainly new to the amount of time we spend talking to them. That's the to-go guest and the delivery guest. We've all gone into the to-go business in a fierce way. We know we're going to be there for a long time. So we have a lot to learn from these to-go and delivery guests. And of course, we're all working to move as many of our guests off of third-party delivery into dealing with us directly. So first question for to-go and delivery, first insight for to-go and delivery guests. These people are so excited and invigorated and thrilled when they get your food home. They take it out of the bag, hopefully the bag with your brand on it, and the container, hopefully a container with your brand on it, and they put it down on their table because they've been cooking for themselves. They've been eating emergency food out of the freezer that they bought at the grocery store, which, let's face it, it's not that great. And now here comes your food. They've always loved your food. And now your food is so much better because they don't have to cook it. They don't have to wash the dishes. They don't have to eat a frozen product from the grocery store. So they are in love with you and they appreciate what you provide for them. Number 2, it's a given. They're home because they feel safer eating at home in their environment they can control. That's an insight. It's obvious. They're not ready to go in the dining room. Number 3, they have made a permanent shift in what they want from you. You know the old story, it takes 21 days to make a new habit. 21 days was April 7th. This is the way they're going to live for years. This to-go component of your business is going to be in existence for years. And that is why I say if you don't have things on your to-go menu that you wouldn't have even dreamed about 3 months ago or 6 months ago, you're not doing your job. So what do we say to the to-go delivery guest? Obviously, the delivery guest is a little less transparent. It's a little harder to speak to them. The to-go guest, we can talk to them because they're pulling up to our front door or they're coming in to pick up. So we need to find creative ways to talk to them because there's some things that we need to know. Number 1, we need to know how to make it easier for them. They have a lot of choices. They're short on time. There's a convenience aspect to this. So if you have a smooth online ordering platform and an efficient pickup or curbside, that's great. If you have a clunky online ordering system and they get to the restaurant and it's a little chaotic, not so great. So how can we make it easier for them? Similar thing to number 2. Do you rate the process for pickup as outstanding or exceptional? Very important. If you come up to a curbside and you've already given them your car and your license plate number or the color of your car, and you have a number to text, and the person comes out with a mask and places your order in your trunk or your passenger seat if your car is empty, that's a great process. If you pull up to a restaurant and you don't know, there's no signage, you don't know where you should go, there's somebody wandering around the parking lot auctioning off food, not so good. So you want to constantly make your process better, because the diner will go with a better process, especially the young diner who has zero time to navigate a difficult mobile site on their phone or wait in a parking space too long. Number 3, how can we make your life simpler with offerings that we don't have yet? Once again, all great marketing starts with market research. We have meal kits, we have family meals, we have freeze at home entrees. We have all sorts of crazy stuff we never thought about before. So let's ask the people what they want. They're already in the habit of buying from us in a new way. Let's have a dialogue about how we can serve them better. And number 4, future pace them. What must happen to return to our dining rooms? What do we need to know about when you're going to be ready to come back, walk in the door, sit down, and ask to be seated? This is information we need, and we need to continue monitoring it as the months go by. Very, very important, the conversation with our new to-go guest, the to-go guest that maybe we never knew existed until now. So once again, if you do have a thought about the to-go guest that you haven't shared with us, that's working well for you, whether it's some kind of survey you stuff in the bag, or you get their phone number so you get to call them back, please let us know what you're doing so that we can share it with the group, because we need all the ideas that we can handle. Last guest. The last guest is the most mysterious guest of all. The last guest is the unready. And if you think the unready is not important, you forgot one thing. The unready represents your profits. When the unready decide the coast is clear, I'm going to eat at a restaurant tonight, whenever that is, this winter, next spring, next summer, I wish I could tell you when. When the unready comes back, that's when your margin comes back. So these people are extremely critical to you. These people may just be concerned. They may have a risk in their household, a health risk. They may just not want to get sick, and that's their way to protect themselves. We need to learn about them, and that's really hard because they're gone. But the best restaurants know their customers well enough, know their guests well enough that they can find them even if they're not coming in. So if you or your managers or your staff have the ability to text a regular that you haven't seen since March 13th, please do, and just stay in touch with them. Here's some insights into those people. Number 1, they've also evaluated the risk and reward, just like the dining room guest, and they've got a different conclusion. Their conclusion is, I'm staying home. So if you remember my daughter's friend's dad that said, I'm sending my girl to school because the risk is lower, the risk is higher, she'll get hit by a car. There's another person that says, if my daughter gets hit by a car, that's one thing. I'm sure she'll be okay. I doubt that'll happen. But in this case, that car is going to turn around, find where I live, hit me, hit my spouse, hit my kids, maybe my neighbors and my grandparents, because that's how the disease spreads. And they've made that risk and reward evaluation. They've said, we're just going to sit it out. We are just going to sit it out. Second insight, they really do miss restaurants. It's the best thing we have going for us. They really do miss restaurants, but they just haven't given themselves permission to come back yet. And that's how they deal with the interpretation of the data they see every day. Finally, the gravest thing on the screen, you've lost your relationship with them. You have a guest that you have spent years, decades in some cases, building a bond with, and you lost them. They're gone. That's horrible. They're gone and they're sitting on the sidelines and they're watching how you behave and they're watching how your competitors behave and they're reading Facebook about this restaurant's packed. Why aren't they at 50%? And they're reading Facebook about this restaurant's doing it right. And you have lost your bond with them. It's very important you keep your bond with them so that when they get ready to come back, they dine with you. So if you will take the extra effort and go the extra mile to communicate with these people who are gone, which I strongly recommend you figure out how to do. When you get there, when you get a text out to them or get them on the phone or an email, here's what you ask. What has to happen for you to come back to our restaurant? We need to understand that. That's our future. Number two, how do you perceive our pre-COVID-19 safety protocols? That's kind of a brain teaser, but that's the story of food safety. That's the story of positioning restaurants in their mind as the truthful thing we know we are. We are one of the most regulated industries that are out there. Most diners think we are on one step ahead of the health inspector because we've never stopped to tell them all the work everybody on this Zoom and all of our colleagues done their whole life on food safety, sanitation, HACCP. And, all of us have thought at one time, I am one bad food sanitation move away from being out of business. So we want to start educating them that we come from a safety mindset before the pandemic. Number three, when you become, so we want to talk about our pre-COVID safety protocols and our current protocols. Number three, when you become ready to dine in restaurants, are you coming to see me first? Do we have that relationship? Can I count on you? People really want their restaurants to survive. We have got a lot of goodwill from the guests that are coming in and even from the guests that aren't coming in. So we want to have that conversation. And finally, we want to future pace those people also. We want to ask them, do you miss dining with us? Because we're looking forward to the time when you will come back. And by doing all these things, we set ourselves up to have a great future. So is there anybody that's with us today that has had the experience of reaching out to a guest that was now no longer a user? Because that's the hardest thing of all. And we all have to learn from that. So I do have a chat, something in the chat from prior. It's from Jim Laub, a handwritten personal note in to-go packages. And if it's a special occasion, personal notes. That's awesome for the to-go and the delivery guests. Thank you, Jim. So I really want you to think about doing this crazy thing I'm asking you to do, and then you lost me for a second there. I really want you to reach out to your non-user and keep that relationship going the best you can. Obviously, it's not possible with all of them, but if you can have a dialogue with some of them, that relationship you've been working on for years is going to really help. And I talked to a restaurateur a few weeks ago that kind of thought he ought to sit out to go in delivery through this. And he had a great email list. And we were able to use that email list to reach out to regulars that were not coming in. And we found out, we proved what I thought all along, which was if he would start doing to-go family meals and freeze at home, he had a market. And it was only by reaching out to the non-user that that was able to happen. So that's super important, to reach out to your dining guest, your to-go guest, and the unready. Because the dining guest is right there. We love them. The to-go delivery guest is our new guest that we're going to be living with for a while, a long while. And the unready guest is our margin, is our profit. And there will be a day when they come back. So let's review. The way that you talk to yourself, your management, your staff, and your guests, the way that you talk to these people is going to dictate the future of your business. Both how you get through this as you survive, stabilize, and dominate, and what your business looks like on the other side. The best operators are talking to all these people and using the technique that I'm giving them to stay close, to build bonds, to make sure their brands are treasured brands both during the pandemic and after the pandemic. It's a really, really important thing to think about every day. Every day. If you're not touching on this every day in your organization, you're not going to have the advantages of the people that understand this technique. And it's hard because every day you're just looking at cash. You're figuring out if your idle money's gone. You're talking to your landlord to see if they'll forgive your rent. You're wondering why you bought those partitions when all of a sudden your dining room cut back to 50%. So I want you to check that you're taking action on all of these things every week from this feedback. From talking to yourself in your manager meetings, in your leadership huddles, on what's going on at the management level and the employee level and the guest level. It's really, really, really important. Start practicing this technique and you will find your path to recovery will get a lot easier. You'll know it's working when you have a specific plan for all these constituents based on the data that you're getting from these conversations. And when you've got good feelings from all these people because they know you care. Everything has changed. Everything has changed. You know, on the left is an empty dining room. We see a lot of empty dining rooms now. We saw closed dining rooms for a while. Some people may be on with us from states today that still have closed dining rooms. On the right is a busy restaurant, something that we will see again. It will come back. There's going to be a time when we're having a whole new conversation. And that conversation will be, what did we learn from this? But it's not time to do those now. It's time to be in action to make our lives better. So future pace yourself and realize your dining rooms will be full again. We're going to live to see that day if we do these smart things that I'm talking about today and that all the other speakers at Marketplace are talking about. Before I wrap up, I want to have one more time for anybody that's got a question or a comment that they want to share. I know we've got a lot of smart people out there, and the more we share, the easier it is for us to get through this. So if anybody has anything else they want to share with the group, now's the time. So, you know, I'm not on the show floor this year, so I don't get to jump off stage and see everybody and catch up and talk and do business card exchange and tell stories. So I hope that you will take the time to get in touch with me if you have some thoughts that have come up in this presentation. If you've got some ideas that I didn't think of, if you email me, one thing I will do for you, make it easy for you, I will send you a list of the lists, a combination of all these lists that you just saw, so that you have them in front of you, so you can take action with yourself, your leaders, your managers, your staff, and your guests. Email me and we will send you some of this information that we presented today. I'm easy to find, and you can always go to my website for tons more free resources that will get you through this pandemic. So I want to thank you for joining us today. I want to thank TRA for creating a miracle in 6 weeks and taking a canceled conference.
Yes.
And
Yes.
making it something. We got one more comment here from Kendra at Jake's. We've been answering every single Facebook, Yelp, Google review personally, and all Facebook neighborhood pages. Never better time to do that. So I really want to appreciate TRA staff that could have just said, well, like everybody else said, we'll do it next year, and thought, no, we can bring ourselves together this year in a new way. It maybe wasn't the smoothest thing in the world, but we're learning as we go.
Absolutely.
And you know, my wish for you, and Ty, thanks for getting this together, and Jen for behind the scenes doing the technical part, is think about how you're taking care of yourself and your people. Practice this technique. I want you to be one of the restaurant groups that survives, stabilizes, and dominates. We have long and exciting careers in front of us. We have a lot of great guests we haven't even met yet that are going to love our restaurants. And that is my wish for you. This may be the most trying time of your career, but that it can end up being hugely rewarding. So thanks for taking the time between lunch and dinner today to visit with me. And Ty, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Matthew. And thank everyone for participating and logging in for this amazing session. Don't forget, we do have more sessions to come all week, Thursday and Friday. So log on to TRA Marketplace 2020. All righty.
Okay,
Thanks.
thanks everybody. See you when we'll see each other.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks.